We are back on the first show, and for you who has just joined us, we were discussing the headlines that made the day yesterday. And of course, when headlines make the day yesterday, they come into the first show today, and we discuss them and what exactly these headlines mean to you and the people that they affect directly. We were talking about, of course, Simon Byabakama, and then we talked about Paul Bukenya, and then we had a conversation over the IGG wanting the many political parties and leaders to declare their wealth. And they said that people are not complying, so they're asking them to continue doing so. And then Karutumwine came in with Mercedes-Benz. Now we're going into the topic of discussion. And there's a story that ran in the news yesterday, and I want us to start with that before we come back to discussion. Over 10,000 government schools being the first ones to be guided in the computer literacy program, where computers will be delivered to these schools. Now, the one thing they noted was that it is not only the young people who will be benefiting from this program, but also the adults will be benefiting from this program of computer literacy. The UCC and government under the ICT department made it clear that internet is a paramount condition for any country to develop. What happened when you shut down internet for 5 days? What happened when Uganda went on an internet blackdown for 5 days? Did we not remember that we needed it? And they said, no, we know that internet is needed in our country, but the reason why we shut it down was for security purposes. So there's no need to fight about this. To come here, we are back bigger and better, and we're coming to deliver computers and teach people how to use these computers so they can be internet and computer literate, because in the future, this is where we're going to be. People learning on computers. Schools have been shut down for a very long time, since March of last year. And it's almost 1 year until when the other candidates were allowed to go to school. Even the semi-candidates have just been allowed. That means that most schools are going to teach over the computer. They're going to teach online. But if people do not have knowledge of internet and computers, how is that going to happen? And that is the argument that they brought up in order to start this program. Let's look at that story to Kumeo and discuss more.
Uganda Communications Commission, the custodians of communications in Uganda, have launched a campaign that will see a number of regions receiving computers in the move aimed at enhancing internet distribution throughout the country.
That has pointed out we are typically looked at because of our regulatory role, but there is so much more that we do, especially in respect of making sure that ICTs are enjoyed by every Ugandan in every Ugandan across the country, irrespective of geographical location, poverty level, literacy levels, gender, and even physical abilities or persons with disabilities, and as well as their age groups.
Concern, however, is embedded in the high computer illiteracy levels among both the old and young in Uganda. Irene Kagwase-Wankambo, the CEO Uganda Communications Commission, confirmed that the first education will begin with government schools.
We've been targeting the government-aided secondary schools and tertiary institutions, and the prioritization is given to us by the Ministry of Education. So there was a question about Ministry of Education being aware. This is a project that's being implemented in partnership with Ministry of Education. The sector, the ICT sector, seeks to provide the infrastructure. Then we wish that Ministry of Education uses this to build up and extend other services.
Judith Nabakoba, the ICT minister, said a total of 10,000 schools have acquired computers, and the local people have not been left behind on internet and computer usage training.
ICT computer laboratories to rural community schools. The Ministry of ICT, through the fund, has installed ICT computer labs in over 1,000 secondary schools in Uganda, tertiary institutions, and universities since the start of the fund. As you may know, ICT is now a major subject at O-level and A-level. As a ministry under UCC, we target those communities which don't add business sense to the private sector, but also areas that are underserved. by the rest of the areas.
3 billion Uganda shillings is the budget needed for the project, and Irene Kagwa also addressed the matter of radios and televisions that were not received by the recipients. Ugandan Communications Commission emphasized the global of internet in paramount in development and growth, where the world is a global village.
The project encompasses a lot more than just delivering the tablets. We are also providing them skilling. So we give you a tablet, give you the basic training to overcome the fear of using the devices, and then introduce you again. For example, we've done content with farmers under the Uganda National Farmers Federation. So we introduce the household to that content. We also introduce the children to these other programs in terms of the e-government services that have been developed.
Maria Dana Namido for Select.
Well, that is the conversation that is going on about computer literacy and internet usage literacy in the country. 3 billion Ugandan shillings is the budget. Donations will also come in to help with covering up the 3 billion Ugandan shillings on the budget of this program. Now, this program, of course, reminds everybody, including Ugandans, about the amount of money that was asked for and was supposed to be used by the Ministry of Education in teaching students in these very many schools and very many districts in the country, online, on TVs, and on radios while they were at home. On March 18th, last year, when we first learned that, of course, Uganda had COVID-19, and there were measures that were put in place to curb down the COVID-19 crisis in the country. One of them, or the very first one, of course, was the shutdown of schools. And apart from shutting down of schools, public transportation was shut down, private transportation was shut down, and then we also saw the shutdown of bars and clubs and places that worked at night. Aside from that, there was also the shutdown of markets, and that was non-food markets. All of them were shut down, and only food markets remained working. And they also said that because of COVID-19 and the ban on public transportation, women who were selling in the markets were supposed to stay and sleep in the markets. You remember there was a distribution of nets in the markets for women who sleep in the streets. We also remember there was a distribution of food, and there was a budget that was put on the distribution of food. However, our memories are still very keen and fresh on the distribution of masks to Ugandans from 16 years and above. Now, when schools started, SOPs were put in place, guidelines for these schools to follow, and only candidates were allowed to go back to school. Now, what the Ministry of Education assumed is that students who were at home and who were learning on TVs and radios learned something before they went back to school. So they said that they will not be putting any examinations beginning of term for students who are going back to school, and students will be promoted according to class assessment. Now, radios and TVs all over the country started lessons. One, of course, it was for their popularity, because, I mean, if STV is bringing teachers to teach, why wouldn't other TV stations copy that? Because they would feel that, okay, since we're in the trend of teaching students, then we ought to go hand in hand. Ministry of Education gave some radio stations and TV stations money. They had a budget that would run teachers who would come and teach. Now, UBC, the Uganda Broadcasting Corporation, which is a government entity, which is a TV station meant to run affairs of this country, is actually still demanding the Ministry of Education plus the government 40 billion Ugandan shillings for classes that they taught during the time the children were in school. Mind you, our children were in school for over 1 year. 1 year approaching. I shouldn't over-exaggerate it, because that's what it felt like. Now let's look at the budget that was put in place during that time for distributing, apparently, the 9 million radios that were supposed to go to a total of 68,733 villages in Uganda. Now, The 2014 consensus, that's what the Ministry of Education presented, showed that only 1 million homesteads had television sets, while 3.4 million homes had radio sets. So those are all the people that had. Now, the option was to have 2 radio sets per village, so that people would sit together and watch it. Asked if that would not promote the COVID-19 pandemic, they said no, it wouldn't. Because, and that is the president's words, he said no, it wouldn't, because in a village or in a homestead, when someone is sick, they would know and report it. So coming together and converging to watch TV will not give anyone the pandemic. But that is also a crowd converging to come to watch these radios and listen to these radios and watch TVs. Now in September is when President Museveni ordered for the reopening of schools, but for only candidate classes, and that was after months of inactivity in schools. Now 9 million to 10 million radio sets was said to be delivered to every household, and 137,466 solar-powered television sets to villages. Now of that, the budget that was asked by the Ministry of Education topped up to 353.8 billion Ugandan shillings for the purchase of radios for all homesteads in the country. Of course, the excuse was to support the long-distance learning among the students. Now, when we look at the budget that was presented, of course, by Bahati being one of the people, that is the 353 billion Ugandan shillings for the purchase of 9 to 10 million radio stations, 500 million is what was given to the Ministry of Information and Communications Technology, and also Ministry of Education to deliver the radios and TVs to the teachers. Now, a total of 37 stations across the country were told to be ready to teach a total of 74 lessons. Now, the 74 lessons and 37 radio stations were very ready to teach the 47 lessons, but remember, the budget, the 353, was supposed to cater for that. That means the 500 million that was given to the Ministry of Education was not enough to run the program. Now, the reason why the 353 million Ugandan shillings, billion Ugandan shillings, I beg your pardon, was denied to the Ministry of Education was because the parliamentary committee went to check on the radios that was given to Orient Transformers and Electricals Limited, the company that was responsible for making the radios, and what they found out was that there was no radio whatsoever. Orient Transformers and Electricals actually was a place that assembled woofers and a few electrical things, but they did not make radios. However, the Ministry of Education had put up a budget of 33,000 per radios, and Orient Transformers was supposed to deliver 5 million radios to the Ministry of Education. When they went to check, only 2 radios were brought to Orient, and Orient brought those radios from China, and all they did was to put it there and show samples of the radios that they would do. However, they had made in China on them. And the ministry said, what is this? You're asking for a lot of money, and you're giving the contract to a company that doesn't even assemble radios. What are you trying to tell us? This is despicable. It cannot happen. Now, the other plan was that the 4 million radios would come at 42,000 each, and they would be imported because Orient Transformers was able to only have 5 million present. Now, the total will be 9 million. Now, when we asked, Orient Transformers was asked, are you people ready actually to make those radio stations? Nebagamba, no, we are not ready, and we need 6 months to train our people on how to assemble those radios. The parliamentary committee said, bas, we're done. You people are not getting the money and no TV a radio will be available for you, and no 333 billion will be given to you to deal with these radios. So that is how it came down to 500 million Ugandan shillings. Now, the question from me to you is that a number of schools, from 1,000 right now to 10,000 in future, will be given computers, so that starting from primary to secondary schools to adult education will be learning how to use computers and will be taught on computer literacy. Given the background of our radio purchase and the TV purchase, how much it was supposed to cost, how much it cost, Orient, Transformers and Electrical, the company that was given, and the fact that they don't even assemble or even create or even manufacture radios. What is the end game to this program that has started? How realistic will this one be? What will our students actually get from this program? Will those computers be delivered? If they're delivered, how long will the program last? And what is the reality of students in Uganda learning on internet? I mean, internet was shut down for 5 days. What is there to back up the story that maybe one time when there's a security issue in the country, internet will be shut down again? The arguments are coming, and I know a lot of people lost money during the internet shutdown. And they're saying now our country is saying that we need internet for development, but how sufficient is the country to deal with internet? OTT was put in place where you're supposed to pay 200 a day for internet. However, schools in Uganda, universities, are supposed to start learning online. What happens then? What happens when there's OTT for me to pay and I'm supposed to go for an online class that will last for what, 2-3 hours, and I'm on internet and I'm supposed to pay OTT, leave alone OTT. The internet charges are exorbitant. The amount of money that each Ugandan is supposed to pay to get internet is too much. 100 MBs go for what, 1,000, 2,000? Depending on the internet provider that you're using. And 9 GB goes for 30,000 monthly. But do you even use it for a month? Within 2 weeks, they said, you've used 70% of your internet. Within half of the 3 weeks, you've used 90% of your internet. And it's done, and you have to load another data bundle. So how are we supposed to maintain and contain that as this internet or online learning is ongoing? I mean, aside from that, look at the situation where they were saying that the campaigns were going to be online. Fine, campaigns were going to be online, but then what happens to people who do not have these radios and TVs? And that's where the excuse came in, and they say that the 9 million radios will be for school, and it will also help in dealing with the e-campaign that happened. However, we saw that the campaigns were not e after all, and there were rallies, and a lot of people got together, and they said COVID-19, and the opposition was arrested. Now, all those stories surround what was going on in the country during the lockdown. Rebecca Kadaga asked a question. The curfew, especially, why is it there? We need to figure out why the curfew is in place, because the question is the curfew there for security measures, or is it there as a COVID-19 guideline, an SOP? All those questions are running in the minds of people. Our numbers will be on the screen for you to help us figure out this whole online learning platform education crisis is what I'll call it, or development for some of you who want to call it that. Will it work? Are we ready for teaching our students and our mothers and our fathers internet usage? Will that program last? 3 billion is the budget that has been put for this program. Is it worthy spending all that money on that program? Of course, we'll have calls on the line very soon to be able to discuss this topic and figure out what exactly is the way forward with the 3 billion that is going to be spent on radios and television.